Yeah, I'm always fighting for my head coach. You know what I'm saying? Every week, I think we all are. We got a lot of respect for that man. He holds us to high standards, and we got to hold ourselves to that standard too.
Jameis Winston on his head coach. Is it dead Dirk walking? Or if the Bucs win out, does Dirk, Koetter, and possibly Jason Light have a chance to keep their jobs? Questions that have a few weeks to be answered, maybe more than a few weeks. Welcome to PewterPirates.com's podcast, A Few Extra Bucs, a few extra takes on your Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We'd like to thank our title sponsors, House of Brews and Sea Dog Brewing Company. House of Brews, of course, in Lutz, Florida. Sea Dog Brewing Company, two great locations in Clearwater and in Treasure Island by the beach. Great brews, great food, and great service. This is a special podcast, ladies and gentlemen. We're celebrating our 50th. Yeah, it's our 50th anniversary. We kicked these off back in June, and already 50 in the books after we finished this one. So we're real excited as I bring in our voice of reason, producer Justin Thomas, who just downloaded a bunch of sound. Part of it you can see on our video wrap we released yesterday, but I think we have well-rounded sound for this show, Justin.
I agree. And when's the last time you could say you did 50 of something?
Yeah, I don't think I can do 50 push-ups. I don't know I can't do 50 sit-ups, but let's go to Roy Cummings, who is always my inspiration when I'm finishing up a run, because Roy Cummings never walks, finishes strong in whatever he does. That's right, partner, right?
I try to, that's for sure. Congratulations to us on 50 podcasts. That's good stuff. Let's shoot for another 50 and see how far we can go beyond that.
I was thinking famous 50s. You have Mike Singletary that stands out, but maybe less famous 50s. Mike Vrabel and Dave Dalby. Remember Dave Dalby, Roy?
Sure, absolutely.
50 is kind of top heavy with Mike Singletary. It gets a little tough to find good 50 after that. Well, you know, we heard Jameis Winston talk at the top about playing for Dirk Koetter, and none of these guys are going to really touch it. He plays every week for him, and you know we know Jameis Winston plays hard or attempts to play hard every week. I want to start off with some sound from Dirk Koetter because we know this about the Bucs schedule next season. They're going to play in either London or Mexico City. I would guess London because of the Glazers' connection to Manchester United. But here was Dirk Koetter on the prospects of the Bucs playing in abroad next year.
I think for right now, we're trying to focus on Baltimore. We got our hands full of Baltimore. That's something that's going to happen in the future. And when the Bucs get to that part, I'm sure we get to that point in the season next year, I'm sure it will be good.
All right. To be fair, Dirk Koetter was asked the question, what does this mean for the organization? But I think a lot of people interpreted that it wasn't we. He was speaking about the Bucs in another tone there. How do you interpret this, Roy? Is the media reading too much into this?
You know, I think they are, really. I mean, just because he says the Bucs in the third person as opposed to including himself, I don't think that means anything. I mean, I don't, does he know he's fired already? I don't know. He sees the writing on the wall. He knows what we all know. The team has not performed up to expectations. He's barely making it as a head coach. I think he probably feels that, he's probably headed out the door. Maybe, if anything, maybe this is more of a suggestion that his plan is, at the very least, maybe he's going to resign. If he doesn't get fired, maybe he's going to resign. Maybe he's figured out that, hey, I'm not a head coach and I'm not doing this team a whole lot of good on the position I'm in. So maybe his plan is to resign. Maybe that's
a hot take, Roy Cummings.
Maybe that's what you can read into this. Is that his plan is to resign? I'm not going to wait to be fired. I'll resign at the end of that could be the post game press conference in Raymond James Stadium after the Atlanta game. No matter what happens, guys, gentlemen, appreciate the opportunity, but I resign.
Do you believe that? Do you believe that's a possibility?
Yeah, I do. Look, Dirk Koetter, I think, cares about the organization in a way that, he wants to see them succeed. And I think at the end of the day, he probably looks at it and says, look, I'm not a head coach. I'd like to be. I wish I was. I wish I was better at this, but I'm not. And, I don't think it wouldn't surprise me if he resigned and said, look, I'm better off for a football team as their offensive coordinator. Put me in that position. That's my strength. I know that now. I appreciate the opportunity, but for this team to move forward, they need someone else as the head coach. I wouldn't be surprised if he does that.
Kind of the offensive version of Wade Phillips, who's an exceptional coordinator, but or Norv Turner maybe. I've never seen those guys kind of admit that, but that's a hot take from Roy Cummings. Well, I don't know if I could see him doing that, but that's incredible. All right, I don't know if we can agree on this, guys. We don't have pre-show meetings because we want these podcasts to be spontaneous. I don't know if you agree with this mindset because you guys disagree with me on a lot of things. You kind of gang up on me, to be honest. I'm kind of scared to ask you about this stuff, but I don't really think that these podcasts moving forward, because the Bucs are out of the playoff picture. I know it's a 2% chance or 1.38 or whatever the hell it is. They're done. They're not going to have a winning record. They're not in the playoffs. We could break down the opponents every week. We could break down the Baltimore Ravens and the Cowboys and the Falcons. But I don't want to break stuff down. I want to talk kind of big picture about this football team, what they are moving forward, who needs to play well maybe down the stretch, those kind of things. Do we need to break down games anymore? Is that necessary?
I don't think so. No, I mean, look, I'm sure, everybody's, look, everybody thinks they're going to lose the next two anyway, just like they thought they were going to lose the first three. I think most people give them a chance against Atlanta at home at the end of the season, just because everybody's going to be heading out the door anyway. And they figure, well, they're at home, so maybe give them that one. But I think everybody thinks that they're nowhere near as good as Baltimore or Dallas. Look, my honest belief is I think they can beat both Baltimore and Dallas. You want another hot take? Do we need to break down the game coming up? Not necessarily, but do I think they can win it? I sure do. Look, the football team we saw, and again, I said this, I think, in our previous podcast, I think a lot of people are basing their opinions of how the Bucs are going to fare over the course of the next 2-3 weeks here on what they saw in the second half of that game against the Saints. That was one bad half of football for this team, basically. And, before that, though, the previous, 8-10 quarters were pretty darn good. And based on the previous 10 quarters, I would say the Bucs have a very good chance of beating both of the teams they have coming up on the road. I'm not going to say it's easy. I don't know if I would pick them at this point, but at the end of the day, I think they have an opportunity to win those games. If you really want to show that you're not the team people think you are, that you're not the loser, go out and win these last three. Go out and win these last three and show everybody, you are a better team. You had one bad half over the course of the last 5-6 games of the year. And other than that, you played pretty good football. So I would say, there is a lot to play for here. And, what will it save jobs? Perhaps. Whose job? Well, that remains to be seen because, again, it all starts up front or up top, rather. If the GM is gone, the coach is gone, you're bringing in new people and new schemes, and that means new players. And then, all bets are off. So we'll see where it goes. But that's my feeling.
You're a hot take machine today, my friend. Unbelievable. That's why people love this podcast. I've never seen you hotter out of the gates than this, Roy Cummings. I don't think they're going to win the next two games. I think they beat Atlanta. I think they finish the season 6-10. That's my prediction. But I don't know. We'll see how it plays out. Let's move to Jameis Winston. I'm looking at quarterbacks around the league, guys. It's amazing to me when you look across the league how many quarterbacks there are. They're either Jameis Winston's age, right around his age, or younger than Jameis Winston. And you look no further than the Baltimore Ravens' newest starter, Lamar Jackson. And, Joe Flacco, he's been the starter in Baltimore since 2008. And I'm not going to break down the matchups here, but I find this interesting when you talk about Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston is 25 years old, I believe. But there are so many quarterbacks younger than Jameis Winston, and Lamar Jackson's one of them. He's 3-1 as a starter. He has Baltimore really in the thick of a playoff, making some noise in the playoffs of the 6th seed right now. They're a half game back with the Steelers. My point is, don't you think, does that worry you, Roy, that Jameis Winston, and we've all talked about, we agree that the Bucs need to hold on to him. They've invested so much into him. But does it concern you a little bit? You look around the league, whether it's the Mahomeses of the world or, I don't know, even the Dak Prescotts, the Carson Wentzes, or even Lamar Jackson or this week, this Deshaun Watson, Baker Mayfield. I mean, I keep going. You have guys that are younger, Jared Goff, and they've made more noise in the league than Jameis Winston has so far.
Well, they made more noise because a couple of them have had some pretty nice runs. They're on better football teams, most of them. That's the biggest thing. But at the end of the day, really, well, what's Carson Wentz done? Gotten hurt a lot. Lamar Jackson, okay, yeah, he's had a nice couple of games here. Good for him. Does that make him a better quarterback than Jameis Winston? I don't think so. You hear a lot of noise about Teddy Bridgewater. I wouldn't take Teddy Bridgewater over Jameis Winston at this point. Jared Goff has obviously outplayed him the last 2 years. No question about that. You look at a guy like Carson Palmer, or Derek Carr, rather, I should say. He's suddenly, fallen down the list of top quarterbacks. I still think he's a franchise quarterback, but he's not getting a whole lot of press right now because he's on a losing team. Deshaun Watson has played well, but again, he stepped into a football team that was a little bit better than the Buccaneers. I don't think Jameis Winston has done a poor job as a quarterback. I understand that a lot of people look at him and they question whether he's a franchise caliber quarterback. I can see that, but let's just take for instance. I mean, look at Jameis Winston's last 4 games and compare him to Lamar Jackson's last 4 games. Lamar Jackson in that time has thrown 3 touchdown passes, 3 interceptions, has a quarterback passer rating in those 4 games these are his 4 starts, by the way, of about, I'm going to guess it's about 74, 75. What's special about that? I heard some people today on the radio locally saying how scared they are of Lamar Jackson and how he's going to be such a test for the Buccaneers. Yeah, okay, he's a nice running threat, perhaps. He can run the ball a little bit. He can throw it as well. So can Jameis Winston. So can Cam Newton. I think the Bucs beat Cam Newton. So, I'll take Jameis Winston over several of these guys. Not all of them, obviously, but several.
I think your best point there is that they have better teams. Now, granted, Jameis Winston has a lot of help, but I think we all thought the offensive line would be better going into the season. So, I guess when you look at the big picture, you talk about the Derek Carrs and if you look at Mahomes and Deshaun Watson, Marcus Mariota, Lamar Jackson, Baker Mayfield, Dak Prescott, Carson Wentz, you see Jameis is kind of in the middle of that pack, would you say? Or would you say upper crust or maybe lower crust out of all those guys?
In the middle of the pack, but leaning towards the upper crust. Look, he's got 4 years of experience. You know exactly what you're getting with him. There's really no question about that. You're getting a legitimate leader in the clubhouse or locker room, I should say. You're getting someone who really works at the craft, no doubt about that. He has his moments, but everybody does. But you're also talking about a guy who seems to be able to figure out exactly when. He learns from his mistakes. That's what I like about Jameis Winston. He tends to learn from his mistakes. I would like to see him on a team that is complete. It doesn't have to be as stacked offensively as this one, but it needs to have a field goal kicker who can kick field goals and a defense that can stop the other team, so that Jameis Winston doesn't have to feel like he's got to make special plays every down, or at least every series, to keep his team in the hunt. So that's what I would like to see, because that's what a lot of the quarterbacks that you mentioned have. Jameis Winston doesn't have that, never has, and at this point, you have to wonder if he ever will.
Well, we can say this about Jameis Winston. He owns it. He owns his mistakes, and he sticks up for his teammates. Chris Godwin, Roy, we broke this down after the Saints loss. Chris Godwin, 10 targets, only 1 catch, and he's been really a steady player, a guy who's really improved, but maybe his worst game as a pro was against the New Orleans Saints. Jameis Winston was asked about Chris Godwin today and how he is going to help Chris Godwin get more involved moving forward, and I liked his response here.
I put it on me. I told him after the game, I was like, man, I gotta get you the ball the right way. So we're going to work hard every single week. The good thing is it's a new game, and I know he's going to bounce back. He's a great receiver. He's a great target that we have here.
So Jameis Winston sticking up for Chris Godwin. Frankly, I was going to ask you guys all of this, and I think Chris Godwin is my one of my selections for this. Moving forward, guys, with 3 games left in the season, I'm going to put you guys all on the spot here. What player do you think has the most to play for because this team's not going to have a winning record. They're not going to be in the playoffs. Let's say besides Jameis Winston, because I think that's an easy answer. Besides Jameis Winston, I'll start while you guys are thinking about it. I think a guy like Chris Godwin has a lot to play for, because I don't think Deshaun Jackson is going to be here. There may be a whole new head coach and a GM, a whole new set of eyes who are going to watch film in the last 3 games, not only the last 3 games, but the entire season. Chris Godwin really has a chance in the last 3 games to show, I'm one of those guys you can count on to be maybe a number 1 or number 2 receiver in this league. What do you think?
Justin, I'll let you go first on this one. I don't want to take your thunder.
Off the top of my head, I'm thinking Cairo Santos. I don't know if he's
Nice. I like that.
If he's the answer per se, and he started off hot. He was hitting everything until last week. But if he can end the season strong, I don't see why he wouldn't still remain on the team. But that's the first one I thought of off the top of my head.
I think it's my guess is Peyton Barber, because it's a guy who I thought was going to step up and really kind of have a career year this year and really establish himself as an every down back. The Bucs obviously believed going into the season that he could be that. He hasn't shown it, and I think that no matter what offense you run going forward, you're going to need a running element. And I think that as cheap as running backs are really in the draft and that kind of thing, and hey, you know what? Who knows? Depending on who the new head coach is, if there is a new head coach, he may want to go out in free agency and get somebody, maybe even a Le'Veon Bell. You never know. I mean, we'll have to wait and see how it shakes out. But I think that's a guy who's playing for his job for sure, because he just didn't play up to expectations this year. And really, it is a what have you done for me lately kind of league. I think you can look across the Bucs offense and see where, I think Jameis Winston is going to be here. I don't think there's any question. I think Mike Evans will be here. O.J. Howard, Cameron Brate more than likely will be here. I think Chris Godwin will be here, just because Deshaun Jackson won't. So, and I think for the most part, I think the line will be here. I don't think there might be some changes at right guard, perhaps even right tackle, but that's more a case of guys just not. In DeMar Dotson's case, he's just getting old. But I think Peyton Barber is a guy who has failed to show what he's capable of, and may not get another opportunity to do it.
What about Ronald Jones' future? What do you see that? I mean, he's obviously second round pick, but we could see a whole new GM and a coach come in here, and do you give up on the guy that early? I mean, how do you approach a guy like that?
Well, it depends on what that new GM and coach think. I mean, how they scouted him, if they liked him as a player. Look, Ronald Jones was pretty highly thought of, on draft weekend. There's no doubt about it. When the Bucs picked him up, everybody thought they'd hit a home run with a home run hitter. Especially where they got him. It didn't work out that way. So I think you have to figure out, okay, what is the new head coach, the new GM, whatever it is, if there is one, how do they feel? If it's the same group, I think you look at it and say, okay, you give him a red shirt season. It didn't work out. A lot of things didn't work out this year. Mitch Unrein didn't work out. So at the end of the day, I say you probably give him a red shirt season and see if he's still got that ability in him. It doesn't mean that he can't play in the league just because it didn't work out this year. So I think he gets another shot.
One guy who did work out is Jason Pierre-Paul. We'll get to him in just a second, but I want to close out kind of the offensive side of things. I think we all would have picked Jameis Winston if we didn't pick Santos or Peyton Barber or Chris Godwin. It's a big final 3 games for him in a lot of ways. And we talked about this last week. I thought Jameis Winston had a very revealing press conference last Thursday. We talked about the visor was kind of diffused all the stuff about the visor. He said it was kind of a swag. It was all about look. But he brought up the fact that he meditates more and he uses this Headspace app to kind of calm him down. Here's what he had to say in more detail on Thursday about that.
It just makes you more present for the most part. Allows you to there's not a lot of time where I get a chance to just spend time to myself and really think. My mind's always going. I'm always doing this or doing that. Now that I'm a father, I'm spending time with family, trying to give them as much time as I possibly can. So in the mornings, you get a chance to sit there and think and reflect a little bit and just breathe. And that's the most part. You gather your thoughts and you approach the day with the right attitude and the right mindset.
He apparently started using the Headspace app 2 years ago. Does 10 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the afternoon. You know what I thought about when I first heard this last week, and I thought about even more when I heard it on Thursday, Roy, is I think there are a lot of people in Jameis Winston's head. I think a lot of people are reaching out trying to help him. You know, and I think this is just part of the equation, really.
Yeah, I think you're right. A lot of people are trying to help him. There are a lot of people in his head, and I wonder if we've reached the point where maybe it's too many people are in his head. Now he's in his own head, so to speak.
Yeah.
But hey, look, I applaud the kid for trying to find something that helps him to find inner peace, whatever it may be, whatever it's going to take for him to play better football. Is what Bucs fans should be concerned about. And in this case, we're starting to see that. Again, we still need to see it for another week or another 3 weeks, rather, the end of this season. But look, for me, he's had error-free football for the most part here over the course of the last 3 games. That's a good step forward for him. He didn't play his best game last week, but he also didn't throw the ball to the other team. I'm not counting the last interception at the end of the game because you're throwing that ball up for grabs. I think he made a lot of good decisions for the most part, and I think that he's realizing that he still has a ways to go with some of those decisions in terms of getting rid of the ball a little bit quicker to avoid sacks. But that'll come. I think he's learning on the job, and that's another thing that people they never want to give anybody credit here or count that. Yes, these quarterbacks to come in from college and immediately start playing like Tom Brady or Drew Brees, who've been around for 10, 12 years or longer. And it just doesn't happen. It takes time to get there. And, again, I'm a big fan of patience and sticking with guys. Most NFL people are not. I don't quite get it when you invest the kind of money and value of draft picks that you do in some of these guys. But I think Jameis Winston has taken some strides forward here in the last few weeks, and if it's all because of meditation and some kind of introspective approach to his life, good for him, because I think it's working.
Last nugget on offense, and this really speaks for the whole team. And, we'll get to Jason Pierre-Paul in just a second, but Jason Pierre-Paul actually admitted to me in the locker room this week the obvious, that they're out of the playoffs. But I talked to some Buccaneer players, first with Chris Godwin, then Adam Humphries. How is this team going to approach their final 3 games of the year?
We're going to go out there and do our best. We're going to go out there, try to put a great product on the field, and try to win these games, man. We're all competitors in here. We're all going to go out there and try to get victories because, we don't know anything else.
It's the same way we approach each and every game, to win every single one of them. That's our main goal, is to win each game, and we're going to do our best to do that and, try to have fun.
You would expect them to say that. The one guy I didn't include that you can see in our video wrap is Jason Pierre-Paul. And this is what I really like about him, Roy. Obviously, I like his play on the field. I like the way he practices. We saw in training camp what a professional he is. I like the way he deals with the media. Unlike Gerald McCoy, he talks every week, and I feel like he doesn't like to be a leader by a vocal leader. He's more of a leader by example. But I think he's been a vocal leader this year in a lot of ways. And you see it in the media. You see the way he handles himself on the sideline. But Jason Pierre-Paul said something this week that, we're all pros, and I expect us to work in that context the rest of the year. And if you ask Mark Duffner, his defensive coordinator, who was asked this week with Pro Bowl voting coming up soon, who would he pick out of all the defense for the Bucs to be a Pro Bowler? Here's what he had to say, followed by the guy he selected.
I think it's hard to not mention Jason Pierre-Paul and the kind of season that he's had for us. I mean, he made some plays in the game the other day that not just in the line and defensive line, but on the perimeter plays and chase downs and excellent pursuit plays that, this guy has really been a very, very strong contributor to our defense. And largely, he's such an effort-filled player. Busts his tail out there, plays hurt, plays tough. And as I said, has made plays both in the run and pass game. I think it'd be awful hard to overlook that guy.
Mark Duffner said you're having an all-pro type season. When you hear that from your coach, how does that make you feel, and do you agree with him?
I think it's pretty cool, that he thinks highly of me, and, I appreciate everything he said. but I'm gonna continue being me, and keep playing some ball.
He's lived up to the hype. Has he exceeded the hype, Roy Cummings, Jason Pierre-Paul?
I maybe just a tad. I mean, let's face it. I think people when he came in, you expected to get what the Giants got for all those years out of Jason Pierre-Paul, and he had another year last year to kind of get accustomed to playing, with the situation with his hand, and I think he's adjusted to that very well. So I would say that he's certainly met the hype and probably exceeded it just a tad. But the thing that I really like about him is that he's not just a pass rusher. And this is what makes him special. And I think this is what Mark Duffner was alluding to. This is a guy who hustles on every play. He treats run downs just like he does pass rush downs. He does run sideline to sideline. He plays hurt. He plays hard constantly, and he's effective. And it shows up on the stat sheet. It shows up on film. And he's a guy that just about every game jumps out to you if you're watching it live. So it's hard to ask for much more out of a guy, and Jason Pierre-Paul has certainly delivered. I got to think that other players around that Bucs defense and maybe on the offense as well can look to him and say, okay, this is how it's done. He's a true pro. He comes from a winning organization, kind of accustomed to getting to the playoffs or at least being in the playoff mix. And I think that's the difference is that here's a guy who doesn't know that you can quit with 3 games left to play because he's not accustomed to, sitting out the playoffs. He's accustomed to being in that race right until the end, and sometimes getting into the tournament. So he's a pro. He's a pro's pro, and he was one heck of an addition by this team, no question about it.
I think he's exceeded the hype, and he had a lot of hype coming in. I think it's funny we look back that he was criticized for not showing up for OTAs.
Yeah, a little bit.
When you look back, I tell you a guy who's really exceeded the hype before we get to 3 and out here is Carl Nassib. Now, Carl Nassib, was kind of that hard knock star in Cleveland and was giving guys stock tips and was kind of a funny, outgoing guy. Been kind of quiet, but you know what? His play's been really loud. 6.5 sacks. Here's what Dirk Koetter said about Carl Nassib and why he's been so impactful and what makes him a great player.
Carl's his length and his motor make him tough. Just when we have to go against him in practice, just those 2 things alone, length and motor, make him difficult to handle. And then the fact that he's usually where he's supposed to be when he's supposed to be there, that's the other thing. That's where the consistency part comes in.
Roy, isn't it funny that all the buzz in the offseason was Vinny Curry and Bo Allen, but here you have Carl Nassib healthier and having better results than both guys?
Yeah, look, another fine pickup by Jason Light, who gets criticized a lot for making poor decisions in free agency, I guess. Well, this one wasn't. By the way, I don't remember anybody complaining about Deshaun Jackson when he came in. But anyway, we can debate that maybe in the next podcast. But look, at the end of the day, the kid is really fit what they're looking to. He fits the scheme. He's played exceptionally well. I think he's a keeper, and that's the thing is can the Bucs hold on to him? I'm sure they want to. This is the kind of season that can get you a new contract. The Bucs are going to have to pay. He's a left end, but he gets the job done. And right now, I would say going into next season, if you feel like you've got Carl Nassib on one end, Jason Pierre-Paul on the other, and Gerald McCoy in the middle, you got to feel like you've got a pretty good pass rush, and the numbers really back it up. So, and I think Carl Nassib has been a big key to that. It's not just Jason Pierre-Paul. Carl Nassib has been a big key to that. He's had a lot of key pressures. And again, he's a pro. He's a hustler, and I think he's a good player. And I think the Bucs are fortunate to have him. I think they'll probably work pretty hard to hold on to him. It's
funny because I love Hard Knocks, and I watched all of it. And Nassib was such a big part of the Browns' rendition of Hard Knocks. And but since he's been in Tampa, if you talk to local media, he's a laid-back guy. You expected this real outgoing, gregarious personality, and he's not. And I had a chance to catch up with him one-on-one. You can see the full interview in our latest video wrap on pewterpirates.com, but here's a portion of it.
You came here, and I know it was a tough situation, but it seems like you've made the most of it. You got to really be happy with making the most of this opportunity.
Yeah, I owe a lot to Jason Light, to Coach Buck, and Coach Koetter. I just want to keep, improving myself and, doing the best I can to help my team and, having fun.
What parts of your game finally do you think you've improved on this season?
Just being someone that, the coaches and my teammates can count on to do their job every play.
It just goes to show you, Roy, in football, that's why, if you have a great preseason, you could dominate in the preseason. You never know if you're going to make a team because you can bring in a guy like Carl Nassib, and you can't really predict the roster sometimes because it's rare, but the Bucs really hit on this guy. But you never know who you can get from another team, late in training camp right before the season. He's a perfect example of that.
Yeah, I would say every team probably, nobody quits finding or looking for top-level players when they set their 53-man roster. Everybody, that weekend is more about, seeing who else gets let go and what can you pick up from it. A lot of times it's a young player who just didn't fit, or work out in one place, and you scouted him and you liked him in the draft and you didn't have an opportunity to get him. That's why when people talk about the draft, they sometimes wonder, why do they interview so many players? You can only draft, 7 or 8 or whatever it is. And why do you interview, 30 and 45, 100 of them really, and get to know them all? Well, you get to know them all because you never know when they might be when you might have an opportunity to pick them up. And Carl Nassib is the guy that the Buccaneers liked in the draft, just didn't have an opportunity really to pick up to get him then. But suddenly he becomes available, and you jump all over it. So yeah, that's one of the more interesting things about the NFL is some of these guys who get let go by one team get picked up by another, and basically spend that season proving that, boy, you sure made a mistake by letting me go, and you made the right move by picking me up. So Carl Nassib's in that group this year for sure.
About it. Well, that wraps up kind of our broad view of the Buccaneers. Like we said, we know they're not going to make the playoffs. We want to give you kind of broad looks at this football team, not only right now, but moving forward. But we have one more piece of agenda to attend to. Justin, you know what time it is. Three and out, baby. 3 questions, and we are out of here. Number 1, and we'll bring Justin in, and I guess I have to go Justin first, right? Is that the preferred order moving forward here?
Yeah, that's preferred at this point.
All right. I think everybody, unless you were a Patriots fan, enjoyed the Miami Miracle. I think, the Patriots are kind of like the Yankees now, where everybody hates them except the Yankees. It's just, I don't know. They win too much. Belichick's not the most lovable guy in the world. But this is hardly the first Miami Miracle. Which is the best Miami Miracle? The recent Miami Miracle with the Dolphins and the Patriots, the Doug Flutie Miracle, Boston College against the Miami Hurricanes, or going way back, Joe Namath's miracle over the Baltimore Colts when he guaranteed it in the Super Bowl? What do you think, Justin?
Ooh, that's a good one. I'm going to go with the Joe Namath one. I mean, that was pretty ballsy for him to come out and say that they were going to win and then to back it up like that. That's pretty incredible. Although I will say I really enjoyed that play this past week, and not only because of how crazy it was and how little that is successful, that kind of play, but also the fact that it was against the Patriots.
Roy?
You didn't count the Miami Miracle that the baseball team, the minor league baseball team that Bill Veck's son ran and was quite an interesting entity for a while. That probably would have been my favorite. It was a minor league Class A team in the Florida State League, the Miami Miracle. But
you're right. That's fine.
I'll tell you what. To me, being an NFL guy, not as much a college football guy, I lean towards the Namath Miracle, but I'm not so sure that was a miracle because they kind of just won over time in the game. I'm going to go with Doug Flutie because it was it's a Hail Mary pass right at the end. Nobody expected it, and they win the game. And what an upset! Granted, the Jets was a big upset too, but I'm going to go with the Doug Flutie throw because that was a miracle play. It was one play. It wasn't just an upset that kind of came about over time. I'm going to go with Doug Flutie and that play because that was truly a miracle throw, a Hail Mary.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Doug Flutie too, because as nifty as that play was for the Miami Dolphins, I don't know. There was something about that Doug Flutie play, and I don't know. I can't ask Justin this because he's too young, but Doug Flutie, when he threw that football, it's almost one of those games where you knew where you were when it happened. Maybe it doesn't register with you like that, Roy, but it does with me. I remember it's early 80s. I don't even think I was in high school yet. I was having Thanksgiving dinner up in D.C. with my relatives. We kind of finished Thanksgiving dinner, watching the end of the game like we give a damn about Boston College, Miami. But all of a sudden, that play happens, and you remember that as a kid. You never forget who you saw it with. Did it register with you like that at all?
Yes, it did, and here's why. I was a rookie at the Tampa Tribune, working the desk. I was an agate clerk at the time, working the desk that night, and it was old-fashioned newspapers. We had our managing editor, our sports editor, rather, was in the slot, which means he's like right in the middle, and everybody else is around him, and he, passes out the duties to them, what pages to edit, that kind of thing. And the game was on, and he was a massive, and I mean massive, University of Miami fan. When that play was done, he got up from his desk. He walked quietly over to another desk at the end of the room, and it was a metal desk. He kicked it, left a big, massive dent in it, and then quietly walked back to his post and went back to work. And after that, some of the guys at the paper circled it with a big black Sharpie and put the score down and the date. And that stayed in that Tribune office, I believe, until they tore it down about a year ago. That desk was a very famous. If there was a museum of Tampa sports history, that actually might have made it into the museum, because it was certainly a momentous moment in Tampa Tribune sports history. It's a moment that many Tampa Tribune sports writers talk about to this day and laugh until they can't, until they're in tears over, because Richard Lord was his name. He was the sports editor, big fan, got so furious when that happened, but he composed himself, gave that desk a good swift kick. The dent was there until the building came down.
It's funny, it's funny how you remember. I mean, it's hard to forget that. That's pretty good. That beats the Thanksgiving dinner in D.C. with the relatives for sure. But November 23rd, 1984, were you even alive, Justin?
I was going to say, I was just over 2 months old.
Oh, so you made it for that.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe it was on TV, and I was witnessing history, and I just don't remember it. I was too young.
Wow. Okay. Well,
there you go.
I digress.
Live for one of the great moments in college football history.
All right, now Roy can help me with this one, but I'm not sure. I try to do my quality research. It's our 50th podcast, so I want to incorporate the number 50. Which athlete is the best 50 of all time? Now, Sid Fernandez apparently is the best baseball player to wear number 50, so we kind of take him out, even though Big Sid, integral part of those New York Mets teams in the 80s.
For sure.
But we do have Mike Singletary, who I mentioned at the top of the show, and we have David Robinson, the Admiral. You got to respect his career. Wow. Who's the best 50? I'm trying to think of a hockey player with 50. I can't think of one.
I don't know if there is one. That number.
Okay, good. You're hockey, so I'm like, am I an idiot not remembering a 50 for hockey?
Yeah. Don't know if there is one. I'll look it up real quick.
That's what I've been doing. A lot of this podcast is trying to multitask here, but
couldn't do it. Couldn't find it. I don't think there is one.
Okay, good. All right, but Sid Fernandez, it took me forever to find a good baseball player with 50. There's no Hall of Famers. There's nothing. So we're down to Mike Singletary and David Robinson. Which career, I'll put it this way, which career would you rather have? We're doing number 50 in honor of our 50th podcast. Justin, would you rather have been Mike Singletary or David Robinson?
Oh, Mike Singletary, without a doubt. He is amazing. He's probably one of the best defensive players I can think of. He's on a great Bears team. I think he's amazing. especially since there's only 2 options.
Well, I'll go with David Robinson. Obviously served his country admirably, and then he became the admiral. Won championships, was a tremendous basketball player, and I'm not even really a basketball guy. I'm not taking anything away from Mike Singletary, but I think at the end of the day, I'd probably rather have David Robinson's life and career, because that was super special in every way you can be, representing your country, and not only, and obviously winning championships, several, as for your basketball team.
I'd really be Sid Fernandez. No, I'm just kidding. I wouldn't want to be Mike Singletary. I'll be David Robinson, because I wouldn't want to have to suffer through those 49er years. He was in the Super Bowl shuffle, though. That would have been kind of fun.
That's true. And I thought about that. You're right, because you're right. The 49ers years were tough. Tainted the image a little bit. But as a player, boy, those eyes pierced you with those eyes.
Oh, yeah. Obviously one of the best linebackers of all time. I agree, though. I mean, from David Robinson, to me, did a lot for the Naval Academy. In terms of athletes, just showing that you could do it. I mean, you could be a great athlete there and still be a number 1 overall pick, and had a great career, a Hall of Fame career after that. So I'm going to go David Robinson. All right, we go off the boards here. Last week, you guys tortured me for my Hootie and the Blowfish, Bob Seger, Bare Naked Ladies references. I actually have lunch once a month, full disclosure, with my youngest daughter, who's in 8th grade, and her best friends, and we have all kinds of fun conversations, as you would imagine. But we had a debate today, and I told them I'm going to bring it to the podcast. All right, I want in order your favorite breakfast food, okay? And I'm going to give you three selections, okay? You got to give me these in order, okay, Justin?
All
you
right.
first. Bagel, donut, muffin.
So I'm going to go in order from
you go from
worst to best. You want me to do it like that?
Favorite to least favorite.
All
Yes.
right, I'll do favorite to least favorite. All right, so definitely the donut. I am a sweet breakfast kind of person, not a savory breakfast person. So the donut, then probably, actually, you know what? I'd probably take the bagel second and the muffin third.
Nice. Roy, you never thought you'd be asked this question, did you?
No, I didn't, but it's a good one. But I'm definitely I'm a donut, bagel, muffin guy. I'm not a big muffin guy. Usually let those sit. Donuts, boy, hard to pass on them. And you know what? When you want to fill yourself up real quick, a bagel will do the job.
You know what? I feel like there's no losing here. You're winning with all three. But I'm going donut, muffin, bagel, and it's tough because I like bagels a lot. Sorry, bagels, but I'm a big muffin guy, man. I love the blueberry muffins, man. Just can't get enough of that stuff.
I love those blueberry muffins. You got that right.
Yeah, yeah. So, by the way, Krispy Kreme or Dunkin' Donuts, Justin?
Ooh. Yeah.
Endorsements could be on the line here if anybody's listening.
I'll go with Krispy Kreme.
Roy?
I'm going with Dunkin' Donuts because of variety. I like the variety.
Yeah.
I want to have a little more than just the glaze on them.
Yeah.
But see, I like glaze is the best. I always go for the classic when it comes to donuts.
I think Krispy Kreme has the better glaze, but Dunkin' Donuts has the better variety.
There you go. There you go.
But you know what? You got to love Munchkins too, man. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, gentlemen, I really appreciate it. We end on food, and I'm hungry, so I guess we all go eat now. But I'd like to thank our title sponsors, House of Brews and Sea Dog Brewing Company. Great brews, great food, great service. We'll see if the Bucs can try to win out here, and it all begins against the Baltimore Ravens Sunday in Baltimore. But we'll recap it coming soon. But this has been another rendition of A Few Extra Bucs. For Justin Thomas and Roy Cummings, I am merely Mike Neighbors. Subscribe to Pewter Pirates. It's absolutely free. And check out our latest video wrap with a lot of sound that we have in this podcast and so much more. Thanks for logging on. We'll see you down the road.